So now let's get to it, and I'm going to introduce our host for tonight, one of my favorite people, I'm sure just fresh from a nap, Marci Ian from Canada AM.
Good evening, everyone. What a wonderful crowd this is. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you're not here for me. I know that very well. I have to tell you, I was chatting with Stuart just a little bit in the green room at the back about reading this book, and it left me with such a warm heart. It is a book that highlights humanity and the strength of spirit and family and diversity and what makes this country so great. He is a national treasure. And what I love about Stuart is that he'd probably feel uncomfortable, just saying that he's a national treasure, but he is. And he is one of, I just like to say, our greatest storyteller. He makes the ordinary extraordinary. I know that you're going to have lots of questions for him. I have lots of questions for him. So let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stuart McLean. Quick switch. Look who came to see you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you.
Stuart, I read a lot of books for
Yes.
work, a lot of them research, and I like to kind of delve into the work of the authors that we often have on our show. But this touched my heart in a very special way. I said to you earlier that I needed this book. It just came at the right time. The stories are so poignant, and I want to know, first and foremost, why you decided to do this, along with your producer, who had a lot to do with this.
We were amazed when we started the story exchange that what happened. You know, there was we didn't know if it would work, and it just it's like we unleashed the floods. You know, we got thousands of letters, and I think we got something like 10,000 submissions the first year, and some of them just blew us away. You know, and so after 10 years, we just thought, well, it'd be worth preserving in some way, you know, because the thing about the radio is it's there for a moment and then it goes, you know, and so we thought they were just worth keeping somehow and taking note of, and then we started putting them together. And you're right, it's a fantastic book. It might be the best book the Vinyl Cafe's put out.
I think so.
And it's the only one I didn't write. But you read. I was kind of amazed myself when I read it all together in a piece. You know, these little moments. We had hoped we would assemble over a period of time, kind of a quilt of the country, a picture of the country, and when you read it all together, it's a little bit even more than that, because it's a picture of the country. It's a picture of what we think is important as a people or during these 10 years, but it's also a picture of people, you know, and the things that people work through and think of.
There were a couple of guidelines when it came to the story exchange. The stories had to be true, and you wanted shorter submissions. And it's amazing what can happen in 2 or 3 pages. These stories are 2, 3, maybe 4 pages, and yet full of so many things, and really enlighten in a way that maybe, you know, novels couldn't, of 300 and 400 pages. Why do you think that is?
Well, because we're such great editors, I think. If you put I don't know, we had 10,000 submissions, so we were able, and we chose 100 letters, so we were able
Not
to
easy
choose,
work.
But we were able to choose the cream of the crop, so I guess that's why they're good.
So I have a favorite. And I have a favor to ask. Will you read a little bit? You guys want to hear him read?
Yeah, I'll do it.
So this is a story that touched me, and it touched me a lot. My dad is an educator, a retired principal, And so when it comes to teachers and stories about teachers and how important they
You
are,
asked me to read Mr. Fisher.
you knew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
you know. Yeah.
That's Jess Milton's favorite story.
Stuart's producer.
Yeah, that's Jess's favorite.
It's fantastic. So go ahead and read this.
When I was going to high school, this is written by Irene Wood, who lives in Edmonton, and so it's Irene writing. And am I sounding okay to everybody? Yeah, that's not too loud. When I was going to high school, I had the good fortune to have Mr. Fisher for grade 11 history. The class was People and Politics, a history of the 20th century. Mr. Fisher used to be a boxer, and he moved around his classroom the way a boxer dances around his ring. I'd heard stories about Mr. Fisher in his history class. I'd heard that during his description of Vimy Ridge, he got up on the desk and rat-a-tat-tatted an imagined machine gun at the students in their desks. I'd heard that Mr. Fisher waved around a blue handkerchief. To say the least, I was curious. During our first week, Mr. Fisher taught us the basics of how he wanted assignments handed in. We were to underline the date, the title, and our name with a red pen, and we were to use a ruler. Our writing was to be legible, or assignments would be handed back. I saw a few people get papers handed back for poor penmanship. Mr. Fisher did not fool around. During our study of World War I, Mr. Fisher made the trenches imaginable for us. We were stunned and horrified by what we learned. He explained the tragedies of a soldier's suffering with tears streaming down his face, his big blue handkerchief always at the ready. We were learning, and we were learning well. There was a boy named Dennis who sat in front of me in Mr. Fisher's neatly ordered rows. Dennis was a troublemaker. Dennis often had his assignments handed back to him. Dennis was often late for class. In Mr. Fisher's world, lateness was not acceptable. One day in the middle of term, Dennis came in late and sat down after tossing his assignment onto Mr. Fisher's desk. Mr. Fisher had reached his boiling point. He stood up, pushed back his chair, grabbed Dennis's paper, ripped it in half, and threw it into the garbage can. He rushed over to Dennis's desk. He pointed his finger in Dennis's face, and he began a 2-minute tirade. That's why I need Jess. Say, go back now, take it. He berated Dennis for everything. He berated Dennis for everything from his tardiness to his messy hair. The whole class was uncomfortable. The longer the tirade continued, the quieter the room got, and Dennis never said a thing. Dennis didn't even look up at Mr. Fisher. Suddenly, Mr. Fisher stopped, patted Dennis on the shoulder, and said, "Thank you, Dennis." Then Mr. Fisher turned his eyes on us. I stood here for 2 minutes, completely humiliating this boy in front of all of you, and not one of you said anything. You all knew I was out of line and had no right to be saying those things to Dennis, yet none of you tried to stop me. Why? Because I'm a teacher, a figure of authority. Because you were afraid. Not one of us could meet his gaze. And so he continued. Dennis was expecting this today because I asked him to come in late, and I asked him to throw his homework on my desk. I asked his permission to rant at him like a lunatic for a couple of minutes. All of us looked up at Mr. Fisher and Dennis with our mouths hanging open. Today, he said, we begin our study of the Holocaust, the Second World War, and how it started. There are not many things that I remember about grade 11. I do not remember how to do polynomial equations anymore. And I'm not sure how to conjugate the past participle of the female pronoun in French. But as long as I live, I will never forget that morning in Mr. Fisher's class. Yes, he was eccentric. And yes, he did get up on his desk and reenact gun battles from the First World War. But he also celebrated with us when Nelson Mandela was let out of prison. And he wept as he read the article detailing Mandela's first hours of freedom. He used his blue handkerchief to blow his nose, to mop his brow, and to wipe his tears. Mr. Fisher taught us how to be accountable, to be empathetic, and not to be afraid to stand up when we knew something wasn't right. In the 4 months that I had him as a teacher, I grew to love him like a father. I can only hope that more children have a Mr. Fisher in their lives. Irene Wood, Edmonton, Alberta.
Life lessons. Amazing. You were a teacher.
Yeah, I was a teacher.
You were a teacher. You taught at Ryerson, my
Yes.
alma mater. Who's taught you along the way? Tell me about your life lessons and what you've learned in the journey so far.
As a writer, I learned, I learned from my producers at CBC first. You know, I didn't know how to write when I started at CBC, and I had my scripts. I worked for the show Sunday Morning.
Yes.
I worked for Sunday Morning. That's where I learned the craft of writing. It's where I learned how to write short sentences and write in the style that I write, write for the ear. And then I worked with Zosky for a decade. And it was working with Peter that I found having learned the technical side of writing, I found my voice as a writer. It's a long time learning how to write. You know, it took me 20 years to find my legs, right? The first 20 years, my sea legs. And then working at the Vinyl Cafe, I've exercised my writing the last 10 years, 20 years. Teachers, E.B. White, who was a mentor. I saw him once. I drove by his farm in Brooklyn, Maine. I didn't stop the car, but I saw him. And his book, the book that he edited by Ed Strunk, Strunk and White, was a big help to me. So I wanted to write like E.B. White. And Bill Mitchell, W.O. Mitchell, was a teacher. He taught me back in the day. You know, it was seen as unseemly to enjoy to read your work in public. You know, the idea was that the words would have to do the work, and you weren't allowed to help them along the way. And so people would go out reading, and writers would let it be known that they hated the idea of going out and promoting a book and talking about it and reading from it, and it was unseemly. And when they read, they would read in a monotone, and their voices would look down. But Bill Mitchell loved reading so much and performing that I learned from him that it was okay to enjoy your work and enjoy sharing it. Leacock enjoyed his work. Leacock was hired by CBC for a period. They wanted to get him on the radio and do his stuff, but he didn't work out because he used to crack up at his own jokes before he delivered them. He'd be moving along to a punchline, he'd just start laughing. So I think Zosky I learned because I learned, you know, working with him and watching him. He was a great journalist. Bill Mitchell, who gave me permission to enjoy performance, and E.B. White, who taught me from whom I learned a lot about the technical stuff of writing and my love of the craft of writing, and my producers.
What makes a good story?
What makes a good story?
Yeah.
I don't know, something, I guess, that if you stopped halfway through somebody and said, I've got to go now, that people would say, you've got to be kidding me. You know, something that when you're telling it, people are saying, what happens next? You know, then what happened? Then what happened? And maybe, so that may, I mean, I don't think about this really, but then also I suppose characters, you know. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just have to be a narrative, because sometimes, I know that sometimes my best stories don't come from narrative, don't come from a narrative idea. They come from the characters, right? And I'll just sit and think about the characters. I'll sit and think about Sam and it's summertime, what could he possibly be doing? He could be visiting his grandparents, and so what would happen to Sam if he was by his grandparents? Well, he's 14 years old, he'd want to run free, you know, and where would he go? He'd go on top of the mountain, and maybe he'd find an abandoned car, you know, and then the story of Sam and Murphy, his pal, prying the car out of the ditch on the side of a road and then rolling it down the mountain came. But it didn't come from the narrative, it came from my understanding of the character and sinking into the character. So I suppose character and narrative is what makes a story. I always told my students, tell me a story about somebody doing something somewhere. And if you've got all three elements, somebody, a person, doing something, action, somewhere, a place, then you're going to probably do something good. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about growing up and what it was like. I watched an interview that you did recently, and you said you didn't feel particularly talented. You weren't a sportsman. You weren't into sports as a kid. Tell me about growing up and finding your way.
Well, I think if I talked about my childhood, I had two things going on. I never thought about it this way, but if we were writing a story about it, we had tell me a story about someone doing something somewhere. I'm the someone, and the somewhere. The somewhere was fabulous. I lived in a place called Montreal West in Montreal, and it was this little community which had railroad tracks at the north, at the west, and at the south, and a main street. So it was like you were in prison in a sense, because you weren't allowed to cross the tracks. But we had this geographic boundary, and then a main street with with a police station and a drugstore. It was like a small town, right? I lived in a big city, but it was like a small town. And it was in the heart of Montreal, in the heart of Quebec, which I think is probably the heart of the story of Canada, right? Because it's the place, the coming together of the French and English in Montreal, and the friction that and the tensions that are there have kind of defined who we are in a good part of who we are. So and then we used to go up north into the Laurentians in the country. I kind of had a big city I lived in a big city, but I had a small town upbringing in the heart of the matter. So that was the somewhere. The someone was me, and that part didn't go as well. I was sent to a boys' private school where sports was the whole deal. If you wanted to be a top dog, you had to be either a brain, which I wasn't, or a athlete, which I certainly wasn't. So I didn't fit in, and I felt, and not fitting in is a hard thing for a young person. For the growth and development of a young person, you have to, I think, be a part of the group. And I was not a part of the group, so I was the underdog rather than the top dog. And so I grew up as an adolescent feeling unworthy, feeling like I wasn't as good as everybody else. And then it was real simple. I stumbled into the Camp Canawana at the YMCA camp, and which was suddenly I stumbled into something that I was good at, and where I could contribute to the greater good, and be part of a group, and everybody seemed to like me, and I was part of it all, and it was just like the most important thing to me. That was kind of my upbringing.
You say you stumbled. Do you believe in fate? That there really are no accidents?
No, I don't believe in fate. Because I believe that there's many roads we can take. I believe that I do believe that your true self will walk down those many roads, and that if you're lucky and can connect to your true self and be your true self, you can be your true self along many roads. It's not what you're doing as so much as how you're doing, and you can bring that to, I could have been something else other than a writer, radio guy, and had an equally rich experience. if I brought my true self to it. So I don't think I was fated to do this. I think it's a good question, but I think I just got lucky and fell into this, but I could have fallen into something else and been equally as actualized.
Is there anything else that you wanted to do?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. The road not taken for me is public service, is involvement in being a member of parliament and being engaged in the politics of the country. That would be very. I mean, I obsess on that. I think
Not
about that.
too late.
Well, it's all. It takes an enormous amount of courage, and I have extraordinary respect for the people who have, of all parties, who have stood. I think we have. It makes me crazy the way people slag politicians these days. They're all thieves and crooks. I think they've done. I mean, if you think about Canada, and you think about a card game around a table, we were dealt all of the low cards, a horrible geography, a horrible climate. Let's take the two historically warring cultures of Europe, put them together in the bad geography. It's like somebody was trying to do a social experiment. Let's put the fighting rats in the box and close it up and see what happens, and what we'll do is we'll put the box in a freezer for 6 months, and then we'll take it out and put it under a sun lamp for the other 6 months and shake it up, and then we'll put them beside this like big brother thing. And then you take those conditions, and then you look at the decisions we have made together to deal with the hard truths of living. How do you look after those? What do you do about those who would harm you? What do you do about those who cannot look after themselves? What do you do about those who are sick to look after themselves? What do you do about those who are too old? What do you do about those who are? What do you do about those who harm others? And in all of those questions, the hard question, do you know how hard it is to get 4 people to agree on what movie they're going to see? And yet we've got 33 million people to agree on how we're going to do some of the hardest things in the world, and we've come up with some of the best solutions there are. And that's through our politicians. Sometimes they let us. Sometimes, on the question of capital punishment, they were way ahead of the population. Other times they followed us, the population, the people. And I think we should be enormously proud of what we've done together and what we and it's continued to do together. And so that's just a tirade I just went on. It has nothing to do, I don't know, I forgot what the question was.
It's okay. So as you continue this journey and travel coast to coast to coast and meet thousands of Canadians and interact with listeners on the cafe, what inspires you most?
The deadline.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like it's my job, and I'm inspired by, I have to write another story we're going on the road in 3 weeks, and I just wrote one story, I just finished, I needed 2 stories. I wrote one where the neighborhood comes together and they decide that there'll be they're going to buy a neighborhood defibrillator, and it just happens that Dave's garage is the most central place in the place. What could possibly go wrong? And I feel pretty good about that story. And good enough that I would coast my way to the tour, except I have to do another story, because there has to be 2 new stories for the tour. And so I'm going to be inspired to write another story, because I have to.
But there's got to be more to it than that. It's not just the deadline. There's passion. Please tell me there's passion.
Yeah, but that's a private matter. No, yeah. Well, there's the challenge. There's I'm very lucky. I get to do something that I love doing, and I want to do it well, right? It's like I'm it's all about, I found something that I'm good at, and I love doing it, and I want to be the best at it. And so I want to write the best story, and I haven't written it yet, right? So I want to, maybe this will be it. And it will be it. It will be the best story ever written while I'm writing it. And then strangely, I'll forget about it. And I was reading Oliver Sacks, recently, and he had a fabulous article in the New York Review of Books about memory and how he discovers he looks back over his journals. He's a great journal writer, and he'll find, ideas that he's working on today that he thinks he's discovering for the first time that he completely resolved a decade ago. And I think as an artist, you have this ability to forget what you've done because you have to keep seeing the world afresh. I have a fairly good memory, but not about my own work. I tend to let it go, and it goes away, and I forget it. And you'll say, what about the story of blah, blah, blah? And I'll look at you with a blank face and say,
Which story is that?
You'll have to refresh my memory. I don't remember that story. So it's the challenge of getting it right, doing it properly.
Is it okay or safe to ask you what your favorite story is?
The stories about either the old guy next door, Eugene, the fig tree, or some of those stories, or the stories about Sam, the little guy. I think it has something to do with me trying to work out my relationship with either my own adulthood or my own death, and my relationship with my dad. It's the relationship between men and between fathers and sons, and Dave and his older neighbor, and the little boy and the older. I keep putting them all together and working with them. I don't know what I'm trying to do with them. I'm just working with them, reliving them, molding them in a way that I would like to mold them, trying them out, living them, getting in their skin, and or just being with them. Just being with them. That's what it is. One of the reasons. Another reason I want to keep going that inspires you is that I feel so close to these people now that if I stopped writing, the relationship would end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You say, well, come on, you can just get up and sit at the table for half an hour every day, think about them, and then go on bowling. And,
They stay with you.
but they don't. They're not real if I just think about them. It's not, because I could think of an ending, but if it's not written down, it's not real yet. So it only becomes real through the writing for me. So it's me wanting to hold on to these people who I love, these characters who I feel have something to tell me, or that through them I am going to come to some truths about me, life, I don't know what, for me or for life, or I'm just going to do it properly one day, and I don't want to let that opportunity go. So that's probably the really real answer.
Speaking, you mentioned your dad and working out relationships. Can I get you to read one more? Okay. So this one that Stuart's going to read is called The Gift of Goodbye. I think it is the second to last story in this. It's by Norm Perkins of Don Mills, Ontario. I love this.
Oh, yeah. The Gift of Goodbye. No, okay.
I'll pour you some water.
I was born in a small mining town in northern Quebec. Over the years, I'd often thought about going back. When the subject would come up with my dad, he'd often say, "That would be a great trip. I wish I could go," or "You'll have to give me a full report when you get back." Finally, motivated partly by my guilt about things left undone and partly by my dad's declining health, my wife Jen and I decided to make the trip. We'd ride our motorcycles. It'd be the road trip in pursuit of my past. It was perfect riding weather, and the winding roads through the rural north were smooth, scenic, and free of traffic. After about 2.5 days on the road, we rounded a familiar bend. I could see the stacks, 2 of them, exactly as I'd remembered. Beacons guiding me home to familiar addresses. Grandma and Grandpa's house, the local drugstore, a wooden sidewalk, a poisoned lake, the Anglican church where I was christened, and, of course, the mine. As well as being the only significant employer in the region, the mine had been the center for social activities. My mom and dad met while working at the mine. My grandpa was an engineer there. Jen and I went to the mine office to see about a tour. The receptionist politely excused herself and returned with a lady who worked in the personnel office. She was interested in my historical connection. She requested names and dates. She left us for about 10 minutes, and when she returned, she was holding 3 employment cards. 3x5 originals, handwritten with a fountain pen, and complete with employment dates, home addresses, supervisor names, positions, rate of pay, raises, name changes from maiden to married, and employment end dates. I was astounded. This was a solid connection to the past, and for me, more valuable than the gold extracted in those smelters. I was anxious to get home to share them with my dad. When we got home, I phoned to tell him about the trip and to let him know I'd mailed him a surprise package. A couple of days later, my brother contacted me to say that Dad hadn't been feeling well and had been taken to the hospital for tests. I decided I should tell him about the trip and the cards in person. I hopped on my bike and headed east down the highway. In his hospital room, my dad and I shared the memories of my trip and his memories of days gone by. The employment cards stirred up stories of meeting, dating, and then marrying my mom. Of winters so cold that if you spat on the ground, the glob would bounce. Of a boyhood prank where he climbed one of the stacks, and of the 2 huskies that used to pull him and his sled across the lake to school and back. Although we had a good relationship, I never felt as close to my dad as I did when he painted those pictures of his life in the North. It was a connection for both of us, father to son, man to man, friend to friend. The memories and stories continued pouring out over the next 2 days. And then Dad's test results came. His kidneys were failing fast. His bladder was infected. His lungs were operating at only 10%. It was pretty clear he wasn't getting out of the hospital. The rest of the family was called as the doctor reviewed his findings with my dad. Realizing his situation, Dad made a decision not to resuscitate, and he resigned himself to the wait. The next day, with his family at his side and an Anglican priest guiding his soul, Dad let go and passed away. The employment cards were sitting on the bedside table. Norm Perkins, Don Mills, Ontario.
Stuart, to say that you are a Canadian icon wouldn't be an understatement. And to say that you're successful wouldn't be either. Are you comfortable with success?
I'm comfortable with, the icon is silly, but...
I saw you flinch. I know, it's like, oh.
Well, it's just silly, but I have a small degree of success in a small part of the country. You know, the CBC country, which is a modest part of the media business in the country. I'm the radio part of it, but it's nice, right? And the success. So yeah, I am comfortable with the success, but it's a modest success.
I'm with a different network, and I noticed you.
Wow.
I'm a huge fan.
Well, thank you.
Tell me about what comes next. Is there anything that you don't have or you haven't written that you still in your soul feel that you need to write, but just maybe aren't ready to write it yet?
Yeah, I had a great idea for a book once, but I can't do it now. It was about my dad, and he had an extraordinary war career. He was in the North Africa, and he was in the evacuation of Crete, which was a major battle, and he just one of very few people, one of a couple thousand of Australian troops out of close to 10,000 who got off the island. He was in New Guinea. He crashed a plane with 6 guys behind Japanese lines, and he was the only guy who lived. There were a couple of guys beat up a bit, but he went down the mountain looking for help. He got his OBE. He was in, he had a remarkable career in the war, right? And we never spoke of it really. That's the way that generation worked. And I had this idea that he and I would go traveling together to everywhere he had been in the war. And it would be, on one level, it would be a travelogue. We would just have, the funny travels or whatever, and the stories. On another level, it would be father and son. And on another level, it would be the relationship of father and son. And the other level, it would be his generation where the major social force was the war, and movement was the war, and my generation where the big, in North America, social movement was the peace movement. And I thought all of this jumbled, and him growing old and me, coming into this is 10 or 20 years ago, into my kind of vigorous middle age. But my publisher at the time hated the idea, so I didn't do it. So that was one thing I wanted to write and didn't write. And things to want to do is, I talked about the politics before. That would be the book I haven't written that I would want to write. And in terms of the stories, it's just to write another good one. Write another good one. I want to write a good one.
You've written many good ones.
Well, yeah, and I want to write another one that's slightly better than those ones. A slightly gooder one.
On that note,
my editor and I, Meg Masters, once I send her the stories, right? Mm-hmm. They all get edited very heavily, right? People wonder, how come you write such nice stories? It's because my first drafts are probably no better than anybody in this room's first draft, right? How do you become a writer? You have to do it over and over again. And the difference is, you write the first draft, you think, well, that sucks. But I write the first draft, and I know, because I'm a writer and because I've got a radio show that I know I have to deliver for, I think, well, we're going to have to make this better. And I give it to Meg, and she gives it back to me, and I make it. And I just have this faith that eventually it'll be good, right? I have the belief system that I can do it. That's a huge step. Anyway, one day I phoned her, and she. I'm always waiting to hear what she thinks of it. Hey, let me know. I say, give me a headline. I send it to her before you send me back all of the editing. Yeah. Just give me a headline. And she phoned me one day, and she started to say, it was great. It's great, she started to say, but she stopped herself. She couldn't say great, and she decided to change great to good. Except instead of it coming out great or good, it came out grud. I said, how was it? She said, it's good. And so that's been a joke between us. I keep saying, I'm sending a story, I think it might be pretty good. So I want to write a good story, that's what I'm doing.
Thank you for giving us so many good stories.
Thank you.
Yes. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the floor to you so that you can ask your own questions to Stuart. Anybody have any questions? You can take to the podium right in the center.
Yeah, and they don't have to be smart questions. They can be, they don't have to be smart questions at all. Yeah, it was the idea we're talking about when I used to do an item every week for Morningside for Peter Zosky's show, and I was always a big fan of Dan Finkelman. And Dan, when I had heard Dan do an item a decade previous to that, when he was on Zosky's show, when it was called This Country in the Morning, and they'd gone to Niagara Falls, and Danny had gone out with $1 to see what he could buy in Niagara Falls for $1. And so I just redid the item, is essentially what it was. And I bought a coat hanger. And it was my goal. I kind of got it wrong in my memory as to what Danny had done, but in my memory, and so the task I set for myself was to buy as much stuff as I could for $1. And I got a pack of toothpicks, and I got a a book of matches, cost a penny. I got a gallon of Toronto water, cost a nickel. I parked my car in the street. And a gallon of Toronto water for a nickel was a great deal, I remember saying, because you could, like, they'd deliver it to you for a nickel. You could do whatever you wanted to it, and then they'd take it back free of charge. However you wanted to deliver it. And I bought this and that, and I was left with 15 cents. And I went to a pet store thinking I'd get him a goldfish, but they were 39 cents, and I bought him a cricket instead, which were there. And then I brought it in as of the morning I was leaving to do my item. I used to do it at 8 o'clock, because the show started at 9 o'clock across the country, but you broadcast live to the Maritime, so did it at 8 o'clock. I got up and I thought, taking all my stuff in, I thought, I won't take the cricket in, right? It was too much work to take the cricket in. I had it in a little jar with a piece of shredded wheat and a sponge soaked in water. The shredded wheat was the downfall of that cricket eventually, because shreddies have binder material into it, and the poor little cricket got bunged up. But I took it in, and I was presenting Zosky with all that stuff. He was a heavy smoker, and he smoked in the studio in those days. And he looked at the cricket and exhaled, and the smoke got into the cricket's bottle, and it was all whirling around. I said, "Don't blow smoke in my cricket," I said, testily. And Zosky said, "That cricket looks like it's playing the back nine of cricketdom." And we just started to giggle. And then we fell into hysterical laughter. We were live on national radio, and you're not supposed to do that. And we lost it completely. We were like lying down on the floor of the studio on our backs, sucking for air. And I remember thinking, this is a problem. Because I was kind of in control of that 15 minutes. It was my job to be, Zosky was in control of 9 out of the 10 of the interviews he did, but in my piece, it was me, right? I would come in to tell him a story, and I was leading the way. And so I sort of crawled back to the table to wave to the people in the control room to play some music, and there was no one there. Because they were all on the floor. And I kind of slunk out of studio at the end of the interview thinking, well, that's my end of my career. And I went back into the offices, and everyone averted their eyes, and I thought, well, great. But then the mail started coming in, right? And everybody wrote from across the country saying how they joined in, and it became people driving off the road and stopping their cars. And it was this national spasm of laughter. And Zosky came to love that moment and would talk about it, and sort of because people talked about it all the time. I remember, and it was early on in my career with him. And I remember the next week thinking, well, that was funny, but it wouldn't be funny if it happened twice. So the next week I came in and I decided I better do something serious so we don't risk laughing, because it would be just unprofessional. And so I decided that week I would follow a blind person around to see what it would be like being blind. I thought, I won't snicker at this. And so I got in the studio with my blind person script, and I started reading, and I looked up at Zosky, and I suddenly was overcome with the urge to laugh. And I thought, good Lord, I can't do that. And so I had to bite on my cheeks and tell a story like this. And then for the next 6 months, I would go in to tell my stories, and I wouldn't dare look at Zosky. And I would come into studio with my hand like this. And if you're at home listening, you'd hear, "Hi, Peter, how are you? It's good to see you." But I was going like this, "Hi, Peter, how are you? It's good to see you." And he was doing the same thing. And there evolved a certain tension between Zosky and I, which was, don't laugh. But we also recognized the laughter thing was sort of a good thing. And so there was this tension between us, not unpleasant tension, you understand, just like artistic tension between us, as we tried to walk this tightrope of kind of getting close to the laughter, but not. And I think that was a lot of the success of our. That the energy from that was a lot of the success of there was a certain dynamic between us which we played off of and worked well for us in those items. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You said I wanted to write the book about my dad, And is it up to me to come up with, with the idea about a book and then write it, or is it the publisher's job? And interestingly enough, that was the idea I came up with at that time. They came up with an idea of me traveling around. Somebody in a sales meeting had pitched Bill Bryson's book about travels in small-town America. And somebody leaned to somebody else in the meeting and said, hey, Stuart could do this. And they pitched the idea to me. I said, I want to go travel with my dad and write about war and stuff. And they said, no one cares about your father. But here's an idea that'll work. And it was my Welcome Home, Travels in Small Town Canada. And I fought that idea and said, I don't want to do that idea. And then I was down in the Maritimes at a writer's, whatever you call it, festival sort of reading thing. And Farley Mowat was there. And he's a crank, and there's nothing he likes better than to complain about something, especially like publishers, right? And I said, and I thought, oh great, there's a Farley, but Penguin kept coming at me with this idea, and I said, Farley, I said, Jesus, they want me to write this book, this stupid idea. I said about like small towns in Canada, and I just hate it. He said, Jesus, that's a fantastic idea. I said, what? He says, if you don't do it, I will. So I thought, okay, I'll do it, right? It's your job to come up with the idea, but, the idea isn't the hardest thing. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's, and if you're not kind of in the business, you sometimes tend to protect your ideas because you think someone's going to steal them from you. But really, it's not the idea, it's the execution of the idea, It's getting the idea done. And so sometimes it's their idea and sometimes it's your idea, and sometimes publishers have ideas and they'll approach writers, and sometimes you approach them. That's how it works.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for one more, Tina?
Oh, we have more than time for one more. Yeah.
So you talked earlier about your interest in politics, and the only time that I really remember you sounding angry on the show, or anything close to angry, was on a show when you were talking about fear-mongering in the media. And I remember that you said that your experience was that the average person would much rather help somebody else than hurt them. And to me, that sounds like a really almost radical idea in an age when there is a lot of fear-mongering, and that it's not at all in line with most of the messages that we're getting in the media. And so I'm wondering, to what extent that seems to be a common theme in a lot of your writing. So I'm wondering, to what extent do you feel that your writing is actually political and is actually pushing for your political ideals and this ideal of what Canada could be?
Yeah, I'm very cognizant of that, and I do that. That's, it's not, I don't want to analyze my own work, but I feel very strongly that the media has hoodwinked us into thinking that the world is a dangerous place. And I succumbed to that myself as a parent. I worried about the safety of my boys in a way that I shouldn't. My mother used to put me out in the front lawn in my playpen. And she used to not supervise me. She'd just go in the house. And she put the playpen right beside the sidewalk, not back from the sidewalk, so that if I threw a toy out, that a stranger would pick it up and put it back in. That was the way people thought in those days. And now, of course, we organize play dates for children. And she once came out and I wasn't in the playpen. And she thought, the bastard's gone to the train station. Because I love trains. And I was like 2 years old, and she just went to the train station. There I was, watching trains. So yeah, I'm conscious of that. And when I have an opportunity in my stories to make that point, I make it again and again, in both small ways and not so small ways. But I am trying to do that in my stories. But it's not that I sit down to do that, right? I don't sit down thinking, I didn't sit down and start writing these stories with deciding that I was going to accomplish that. I sit down to write stories. But if I get a chance to do that, I'll do that. Yes, and then yes.
Hi. Thanks so much for coming and giving us all the opportunity to
Well,
hear
thanks
what
for
you have to
coming,
say.
for all of you coming too, because I would have done it without you, but it would have been, the question period wouldn't have gone nearly as well.
I grew up listening to Vinyl Cafe over brunch often on the weekends at my parents' house, and now I listen to it with my family, so that's cool. I wanted to know if you have any advice for someone starting out as a writer.
Yeah, I have lots of advice. First off, read Ed Strunk and E.B. White's book, The Elements of Style. And if that's too complicated, it's kind of like reading. It's so distilled that it's hard to read. William Zinzer's book on writing well is a great book. He prays at the same altar and presents it in a more readable fashion. So either William Zinzer's book on writing well or Ed Strunk and E.B. White's book, The Elements of Style. Then you've got to get yourself a deadline, and you get yourself a deadline by enrolling in a writer's course or a writer's craft course or a volunteering at the local newspaper, the school newspaper, or joining a writer's group, something where you'll have to write something by a certain time and show it to others. And that's the third bit of advice. You've got to be showing your work to somebody and getting feedback. If you educate yourself a bit about it, and then get yourself a deadline so you have to write, and then be writing in an arena where people look at your work will get better. Have I ever learned something from my characters? Nice question. Once Sam, there was a big neighborhood party, and Sam went to his mother, and he had gotten a crush on a new girl in the neighborhood, and he came to his mom and said, "I'm going home now. I'm not feeling so good." It was like, and she said, "You're going early?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm not feeling so good." She said, "Too many Cokes?" And he said, "No, I smoked." She said, "You smoked?" And he said, "Yeah." And then he said, "Do you think I'm going to get cancer?" And Mom said, "No, I think you'll be okay." And then she said, "Do you think you can quit?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I think that's what I'm going to try tomorrow." I thought that was a great response from the mother, "Do you think you can quit?" And I thought, where did that come from? How come I wasn't that smart? I mean, my kid never came to me and said that, but I mean, how come I'm not that good as a parent, But I would never be that smart to say that, yet I wrote it. So yeah, I learned, sometimes they do things that are better than me, so I learn from them when they're better than me. And
Fantastic.
What's the funniest story I've written and why? I don't know. In the early days, I used to write, and it would crack me up sometimes. I don't remember. I'd be alone in my room, howling with laughter. Like I'd be going, that doesn't happen so much anymore. Every once in a while it does, and it's just one of the greatest things ever. You're all alone, and you're doing it, and you're cracking yourself up as it's happening, and you're thinking, this is amazing, this is going to be great. It's really, it's kind of like surfing or something. But I don't think, I don't think any of them are, are that great yet. I mean, I know This is not false modesty. I'm just trying to tell you what it feels like to be inside of me. To be inside of me, you don't sit and think, you don't spend your time thinking, which is the greatest. I am thinking always of, will the next one be okay? The other ones go away, and you don't think about them. They're gone, and you let them go, and you're thinking, can I still do it? Oh, what's an idea? What is this one going to be? I mean, I just came up from Montreal this morning on the train, and I'm trying to think of what the next story is going to be, and I got 4 ideas. A photo about the photo booth. What about a photo booth? I don't know about a photo booth. I'm reading history about a photo booth, and I think maybe Dave could make his own photo booth, and maybe it'd be a photo booth that he wants to get special pictures of people so the seat drops every time the thing goes. And people startle, right? And then I'm thinking, or maybe I should write about Dave's rock and roll history. And so I interviewed on the train a guy who used to be the road manager for Alice Cooper, and I was getting stories from him. And then I'm thinking also there's 2 other ideas. I don't even remember what they are, but what are they?
You can share them with me.
I don't know. Photo booth, Dave's rock and roll, and 2 other ideas. And that's how I spend my time. I'm not thinking, wow, which is the best? I'm thinking, dear God, which one can I do next? And how do I make it good? Sure. Do I read much, and what do I read? I read the New Yorker magazine. I read the New York Review of Books. I read Nutrition Action. I read the New Yorker and the New York Review of Books. Religion, like not everything in them, but a lot. Books, I read over the summer. I read John Ralston Saul's book on Baldwin LaFontaine from the Extraordinary Canadian series, which was a fantastic book. How these 2 guys kind of laid the groundwork for the Canada that we have developed. And I read a nonfiction book about the 1893 Chicago World's Fair called Devil in a White City. So I tend to read nonfiction.
We've got time for one more question, Stuart.
Your show's been really great for introducing fairly obscure musicians sometimes.
Why don't you just cut the question, your show's been really great, and just leave it there. That would have been enough.
Well, but it's because I want to bring the
Okay.
conversation around to the music on your show.
Okay.
Okay? So how do you make decisions about the talent you expose
How do
on
we
the show?
how do we make decisions about music? It's a part of a long, ongoing conversation between Julie Penner, who's the music producer of the show, Jess Milton, who's the producer, and myself. And I am the smallest voice in the room. Julie listens to everything that comes into CBC. So much, goes on. So much is done by producers and editors that you don't see. So Julie listens to all sorts of music. Then she sort of tells, and Jess goes to all sorts of shows and listens to all sorts of music, and they have an ongoing conversation, which I'm allowed to be part of sometimes. And then we just talk, right, about it. And they send me stuff, and I listen, and they listen, and then the choices are made. Either I write something and they rack their brains from everything they've listened to think of something that would go well with what I've just written, or they send me something and it's like I've just been assigned a book to write, right? They send me something, I got to write something to it. And then we choose sometimes, that's the studio shows, and then we choose sometimes, we'll go somewhere, because we want to shine the light on a particular musician. We'll say, gee, we want to have Ron Hines on the show. Let's go to Newfoundland and record a show there. Or we'll go to Newfoundland and we'll think, we got to have a local musician. And so we'll start listening to local musicians until we find one who we think is someone we'd like to have on the show. So we come at it in all sorts of ways, and it's an ongoing, constant conversation, and we have lists, and we cross people off and add them, and it's like that.